Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Sarah Elliott, and she is making her return appearance. She recently returned home from Washington, D.C. after attending the National Conference of the Little People of America. Welcome to the show again, Sarah.
Thank you.
So, you went to Washington, D.C.
I did.
Did you get to see the Prez?
No, I didn't even see the White House.
Oh, you didn't see the White House?
I went into D.C., but it rained a lot of the time that we were there. And the shuttle, I saw like the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Monument and stuff, but we didn't see the White House.
Right. Well, the last time you were on, you were talking about your mission. So let's talk a little bit about your mission before you talk about your trip.
Okay. I still am very interested in advocacy and teaching this area about dwarfism and about any kind of differences, really. Before I left on June 14th, I got the call from Dartmouth that my diagnosis, in fact, had changed, and I have MED, which is multiple epiphyseal dysplasia. It explains the osteoarthritis in my legs. And the radiologist from LA saw no signs of the hypochondroplasia. So it was a little interesting, but it made me that much more focused on going to this conference and learning about my new diagnosis. And also, I mean, it's hard to say what happened when I was born because I don't know. I mean, I was there, but I don't know.
Right.
My parents were given a diagnosis, and then that was all they were told.
Right.
The doctors gave a diagnosis. A lot of times, I mean, there's 200 different forms of dwarfism. So if a baby's born and they see you and you clearly have achondroplasia, they say, okay, this baby has achondroplasia. With me, I didn't have the features of achondroplasia, so the next dwarfism they knew most likely was hypochondroplasia, and they kind of slapped a diagnosis on me, and then I went my whole life with it. And my question to the doctors that I saw in DC is, why did nobody ever notice a difference? Why is it that, you know, I walk into a room now and all you geneticists are like, oh, you're clearly MED, you look just like MED. How is it that no other doctor that I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen a lot of doctors,
Yeah.
How did none of them ever say, you know, I don't really think you have hypochondroplasia? And their answer was that a lot of times if a doctor is, if you're diagnosed with something and then you go see another doctor and you say, I have such and such, the doctor doesn't question it, they just treat you for it. They don't have a reason. If there's no reason to question it, then they don't question it. So with the problems in my legs and everything, they just kind of assumed it was because of the hypochondroplasia or the club feet or whatever. And after getting the diagnosis, I had gone to Dartmouth a couple days later, and I told my orthopedist, and he goes, oh, well, that does make sense. And I just wanted to say, how did you not pick it up? How did you not know?
Right.
And I guess it really strengthens what I want to do, because it's the doctors from smaller hospitals and smaller areas that just don't realize the number of types of dwarfism that there are, and that if you're not familiar with it and you don't see it, then you're not going to know.
Right.
So a lot of times it'll go undiagnosed because doctors just have no idea what it is. So I think there needs to be like more education in the medical field.
So how do you think your doctors were around here? Do you think they treated you adequately, though?
Yes, everything that I had done and the way that I was treated was the same as it would have been had I been an MED dwarf from the beginning. The only difference I can think of, and this is just out of my own head, is that when I was growing up and I always complained about the pain in my legs, and they, you know, would say, well, maybe you just need to lose weight, or maybe you need to do physical therapy, maybe you need to exercise more. Really, I was getting arthritis in my childhood years, early teen years, and now it's degenerative. Like, my cartilage is going away. Right. So I guess I would, had I known, I would have been able to fight more for myself and say, look, I need to know. I never, from some of the meetings I went to that talked about MED, they say, guard your joints. Do not jump, do not run, do not do anything that's going to compromise them, because you're only hurting yourself. It's not going to make it any better. So knowing that, I probably would have not done as much activities. And as it is, I didn't do a lot of activities. Mm-hmm. So knowing that the little activity I did may or may not have hurt me, mm-hmm. Now I know. And now I know that I can't go for a mile walk. I can't run, and I have to just accept it. And I can, because it hurts. So right. I don't do it anyways.
And you've already had joint replacements too.
Yeah, I had both of my hips replaced, and I did talk to my doctor about my knee, because when I was in DC, I could barely walk. My knee was so painful. I think it was a lot of stress buildup in there, but they kept saying, no, we want to wait. We want to get you as long as we can before we do this. So now I'm back in physical therapy, swimming, and I saw a doctor at the LPA conference, and he said, the best thing for you to do is to get in a pool 3 to 4 times a week for 45 minutes or an hour. So that's kind of what I'm doing now.
So did you go down to the conference by yourself, or did your mother go? Or because I know a lot of times you said you bring your mother along yep. on your doctor's appointments, or were you on your own?
I was on my own. The week leading up to it, I was so excited. Once I knew that I had the money and that I was going to be able to go, and I bought my tickets, I took the train down, and my dad brought me to the train station because it was the same day as Relay, so my mom was at Relay right. for life, and the train got there, and it was so nerve-wracking. Like, as soon as I got on that train, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really going. Like, there's no turning back, and then the train, left, and I was on my way. I didn't get to DC until 10:30.
Because wasn't it, I was following you a bit on Facebook as you were sitting there. Didn't you do a lot? It wasn't like a fast trip, was it?
No, it was 11 hours yeah. on a train. We had to stop, like, at every train stop. Yeah. So people get on and off, and then it got really busy in New York City, and then we got off in Washington, and that's the last stop for the train, so it was easier to get off and everything, but it was definitely an experience. Like, I'm fine sitting for long periods of time, but with my knee hurting, I was getting really uncomfortable on the train, and I kind of was like, oh, I should have just flown. And then my flight home, that's a whole nother story. Like, I was supposed to come home on July 5th, and I was exhausted, and I decided to come home July 3rd. So I flew home, and my flight was delayed. Like, I was waiting in airports for 12 hours. All day, excuse me. I was supposed to be home by 4:30, and I didn't get home until 11:30 at night, and it was...
Those are always fun.
Yeah.
So now, what's this photo of?
This is the hotel that I stayed at. It's the Marriott Wardman Park. It's a huge hotel. It's basically a conference-based hotel. They have, like at the Sheraton, they have the whole conference center, and this hotel was just like that. They had like escalators and different floors of the conference center, and then there was the actual hotel itself.
Oh, so you actually stayed, you slept and went to the conference in the same yep. building? That was probably handy.
It was. I almost didn't stay because it was quite expensive, but then I found roommates that I was able to stay with, and I didn't leave the hotel for the first 2 days. I didn't leave the hotel till Monday because everything I needed was there. They had a little cafe for breakfast and restaurants and
this is a sign inviting people to the conference.
Yep, this is the sign that you saw when you walked in. They had the green Little People of America banner type signs throughout the conference center, and then the big sign was, right leading you kind of into our conference, because there was other conferences going on at the same time, but ours was kind of the most.
How many people went?
I learned after that there was 2,400 people registered, and that's not just little people, that's little people and their average size, spouses, relatives, children, whatever, but there was 2,400 people at our conference, and there was 6 out of the 7 continents represented in, I want to say, 18 countries.
And these are your roommates?
Yep, these are my roommates, Lindsay and Jennifer's daughter Kaylee. They don't have the same dwarfism. We all had different dwarfisms in my room, but they're, you know, in their 20s or 30s, and they're about a foot shorter than I am.
Now, growing up in the Northeast Kingdom, I think you said that you were fairly sheltered when it came to the world of dwarfism.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I never had spent time with other little people. I never really talked to them. And then when I went to the regional and I was able to talk and get answers and stuff, and I mean, I said it then and it's still true. It's just so relieving to talk to people that know what I'm going through. And Lindsay, actually, she has SED and she has a lot of joint pain. And so when we were hanging out at the conference and we went to bingo or something and then we went somewhere else, she would have to stop and take breaks and I would have to stop and take breaks, and it was just, I mean, I don't wish this on anybody, but it was good to meet somebody that's dealing with the same thing, you know, at a young age. She needs joint replacements also, so we kind of would take our breaks together and only do a little bit here and there.
So even though you learned a lot from the doctors who were there, I assume that it was really educational and almost therapeutic then to also just hang out with people who understood.
Yep, and the first night when I got there, Jennifer was in the room with her daughter and our other two roommates were off downstairs, and we got to talk for a little while, and she's very small and she was able to carry a baby. And I mean, that's been my biggest concern. I'm not family planning, but I want to know if I can have children. And seeing most of these women at the conference that are much shorter than me that have children, I'm okay now. Like, I'm like, you know, and to watch them and to share a room with people. I mean, first of all, I didn't even know these people and I shared a room with them, so that's a little crazy, but they were so nice. They were just such sweet women, and they had to make adaptations in the room. I mean, we had stools in our room. The hotel was 100% adapted to little people, and to see, you know, them getting ready in the morning and the things that they have to go through, whereas like I can just reach this, or I can, you know, I don't need a stool to stand at the sink, but they have to have something because they're so much smaller.
I would think there's a lot of their coping mechanism too is probably a bit of humor. Like, did you hear humor at it as well, you know, at this whole conference?
Yeah, yes and no. The first day I met some people that I had been talking to on Facebook, and then I met a girl from Connecticut. She's like 16, I think, and we talked, and you know, we were both discussing how it's odd for us to be around all these short people because we're a little bit taller and they're shorter. And then I met one guy he's probably a foot shorter than me, and he was like, "Oh, so you must be getting sick of looking down at everybody." And I was like, "No, not really. I mean, it's different. It's different for me to be looking down than it is to be looking up all the time." But yeah, I mean, there was humor. I mean, I maybe just like didn't pick up on it.
Right. You know, you touched on a good point. Is since you're 4 foot, what, 4'9"?
4'8".
4'8". Is there were you readily accepted amongst the people who are, say, like 3 feet tall?
I felt different. Walking in, I felt like I shouldn't be here. And that's how I feel every time I go to an LPA event is, what am I doing? I'm not this small.
Right.
So meeting people that are, you know, kind of the same height as me, a little bit shorter, I do feel like some of the people that, I mean, obviously I didn't know very many people and they didn't know me, so looking at me, it's hard to tell if I'm just an average size relative or if I'm a little person.
Right.
But I mean, I think that they knew that I was a little person, and I went to the things and I said, you know, I have MED, I'm you know, dealing with all this stuff. So the people that I got to know were accepting of it. But I did feel like an outsider.
You know, I know a lot of people probably ask you, well, I know somebody who's 4'8". Does that make that person a dwarf? Well, just because somebody's 4'8" doesn't mean that they're a dwarf, right?
Right.
Because you actually have genetics.
Yes.
That you know, basically it's your genetic code that says you have dwarfism. Well, it's like, for example, I think my mother is now in her later years probably about 4'10", but she doesn't have, just because she's 4'10" doesn't mean she has dwarfism.
Yeah, and that's something, I'm not sure if I learned it there or if it was from talking to people or something, but there was a case of a woman who was short, and they finally diagnosed her with dwarfism, and she was like, so, you know, like, it doesn't matter because she's been short her whole life. And you're right, though. I have limitations, and I have the osteoarthritis, which is unusual. I have stiff joints, and I have a genetic, you know, I haven't got the genetic testing done yet, but I have a gene mutation somewhere. On one of my genes, there's a mutation that causes this. Some people are just generally short. I have a cousin, she's 4'10". Her mother's very small. She isn't a dwarf, but, you know, dwarfs can be that tall and still have dwarfism.
Right. Okay, what about this photo?
These are some little girls from my district. I believe they're all from my district, at least 2 of them are. And this was our trip to the Smithsonian. One of them, our district director's daughter, is featured in a exhibit that was done by Rick Giotti. He's a photographer, and he used to do fashion photography, and he noticed that he was always being told to photograph the beautiful people, the pretty people, and he started to photograph people that had differences.
And that's this photo right here.
Yep, this is the little girl beside her actual photo in the exhibit. So she was a little famous because she has a picture in the Smithsonian. So we all wanted to kind of see her next to her picture. And it's all about, it's in the Human Genome exhibit at the Smithsonian Natural Museum of History.
Right. And so you did get out and around a little bit then.
We went to the Smithsonian to see the exhibit. Rick Giotti actually came with us, which was really neat. And I did a little exploring. I saw the Hope Diamond, and I've been to natural history museums before, so I was kind of like, I wish I could go explore other stuff, but it was so hot down there. It was so hot, and it was raining most of the time, so it was like starting to rain. I was like, I better just get back to the hotel.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. is one of those places I'd like to go for 2 weeks. I've been for a couple different times, and you never have enough time to hang out in Washington.
I mean, I've learned that there were 16 Smithsonian museums, so I was like, I was excited because I was going to the Smithsonian, and then I found out it was 16 buildings, and I'm like, just kidding, I made it to one.
Actually, I haven't even been to the Smithsonian while down here. I just get awestruck by the mall and all the monuments.
Yeah, I wanted to get to Arlington Cemetery and to the monuments and stuff, but there was too much to do, and I said, you know, I'll have to come back down here some other time specifically to visit all this stuff.
Okay, what about this photo?
These are the group of Pseudoachondroplasia dwarfs. I was invited to their little meet and greet because MED and pseudoachondroplasia are on the same gene. It's like when you have a comma in a different place in a sentence, our mutations are like the commas on the same gene. So they have this and I have this other thing. So I was invited to their little meet and greet because I have a lot of the same like physical problems, the osteoarthritis, the limited mobility, the stiff joints. And then they just took a group photo, but I'm not pseudo, so I wasn't in the group photo. I took the picture, but
so some of them were your height too.
Yep, and that's one thing. There's a researcher from Texas that does research on pseudoachondroplasia. They made Dorf mice, and they do research on mice. And one thing that they cannot figure out is why some pseudo-dwarfs are tall and why some are small. Like obviously in the picture, there's a woman who's probably 2.5 feet tall, and then there's some guys that are the same height as me, but they all have pseudo. So that term was kind of made in the 70s when they didn't know what to call these people that had dwarfism, but they didn't fit into any category, so they named it pseudoachondroplasia. And it was really interesting to learn about all the research this woman is doing, because she's been doing it for years and years and years, and comes and presents it to the people that are actually affected by this. So I'm affected by some of the things, and then I also learned that I kind of have some characteristics of dystrophic dysplasia, which is the type that Matt Roloff has on Little People Big World.
Okay.
So like the stiff joints, like my wrists don't bend, my fingers, like the genetic doctor looked at me and said, you know, you're on the dystrophic spectrum of MED, but you're on the MED side. So it's really, really confusing. I'm like a mixture of.
So this must be really interesting for the doctors as well, just because, you know, they don't have this opportunity often to, you know, be able to work with so many little people.
Yep. The doctors that come, I'm not sure if they're the same doctors every year, but there is a medical advisory board, and those doctors have been with LPA for a long time, and they do a lot of the research, they do a lot of the care, and then they invite people to come. There was like 20 or more doctors, and they all pay their way to the conference, and then they see the patients all for free. So it was really neat. The orthopedist I saw, he's actually a little person himself, so it was neat to see a doctor.
Well, that would have been interesting, just because, you know, when you go to a doctor, a lot of times they understand your problems through the books. But, you know, if you're actually seeing a doctor who can truly understand you, that must be nice. So there were also some notable people there. Who was this fellow?
This is Warwick Davis. He, my roommates, I had left my meeting, they left their meeting, and then they said to me, "Do you know who Warwick Davis is?" And I was like, "Yes, of course I do. He's in Harry Potter." And they're like, "Well, he's up there. He was at our meeting. He has SED." So I was like, "Oh, can I go see him? Is that going to be okay?" I was like shaking and stuttering, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine." So I was like being a creeper, and he was talking to some people, so I'm like standing there waiting, like I don't really want to interrupt. And then I talked to him, and I said, "This is my first conference, like I'm a huge fan of yours." And I was like, "Can I get a picture?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then he's like, he just like talked to me a little bit after, and then I saw him later on in a different part of the hotel, and he waved to me and said hello, and he had his family there. They're all little people, and it was just really neat to meet him, because he is, I mean, there's a lot of famous little people actors, but I never thought that I would meet him.
And now what about this young lady?
This lady, her name is Casey, and she's from the show Pit Boss. She was featured on it a couple of times. Pit Boss is a pit bull rescue organization made up by Shorty, who is a little person. His name is Shorty, and she's been featured on the show a couple of times. So when I saw her, we went to the talent show, because she's friends with my roommates, and I was like, "Gosh, that girl looks familiar. She looks really familiar." So I finally figured it out, and I asked her, and then I was like, "Can I get a picture with you?" And I couldn't believe it. Like after I met Warwick Davis, I called my parents, and I was like almost crying. I'm like, "You're never gonna believe what just happened to me." Like I thought maybe I would see the roll-offs. I didn't know if they came or not, and I found out that they do sometimes come, and that there are other Dorf actors that do sometimes come. I mean, they're members of LPA, and why wouldn't they come? And I mean, even one of my roommate, the one that took the picture of us in our room, she's not in the picture, Julie, she's written a book. So I read the book before I went down, and then I found out she was my roommate, and so I told her, I was like, "You're a celebrity to me because I've read your book." And she was just so nice. She's such a wonderful woman. Like I love all my roommates, and we've kept in touch still on Facebook.
So with only a few more minutes left, I know you went down with high expectations. This was something you wanted to do. You went out there, you helped, you worked to get funds, you went to businesses, you solicited. Because this is what you wanted to do. Was it all that you thought it would be?
Yes, it was. It was relieving and it was inspiring because there's so many people like me with dwarfism that have it even harder than I do because they're smaller than me. So for me to be taller, I have it easier, but I also have it harder because people don't look at me and say, oh, she's a little person.
Right.
They question it because they don't know.
Right.
So I really learned some things that I can say and I can talk about and explain. And I have this knowledge now, and there's a word that I can't think of, but I have this knowledge that all these people that are there are successful in some way, and I can be too. And there's, a lot of them want to be advocates, and they do go to local schools and stuff and talk about it because it's easier to educate than it is to put up with the aftermath of not educating. So really, having this as an experience and as something I can put onto my resume and say, look, I've done this, I'm educated, and I want to pursue teaching this to people in the area. I really, once school gets back in session, I want to do a presentation at the school I work at, and hopefully all the schools, and then wherever else I can go and present.
Right. Yeah, because I think everybody knows you're not supposed to poke fun at somebody because of their color, because of their weight, but I still think it's probably acceptable to comment on somebody's height. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying
right.
Society views it as...
Yeah, society does view it as not, it's whatever, and the people there are very strong as a community of little people. And before I left, there was a thing that had gotten put on the internet about t-shirts that you could buy that say, pet midgets are awesome, and midgets were put here for your pleasure, use them however you'd like or whatever. And a whole group of little people protested or fought this company, and the company took down all the shirts.
Right.
So knowing that they can do that, and there is, like I said before, there's people who are okay with the word midget, there's people who aren't. Short stature, little person are the things to say, or just a person's name.
Where we are kind of naive in the Northeast Kingdom because we're sheltered, and it's a small group of people. But I think back to the 70s, my first knowledge about little people was we would have the Canadian wrestlers that would come through, and amongst them were midget wrestlers. Mm-hmm. And how do you feel about those folks who decide to go that route?
It's their choice. I don't think I would do it. I wouldn't mind being an actor of some sort and being, in a movie because I am little. I feel like that's the difference, is that there's agencies that have little people actors, and there's roles in movies and television that call for little people actors, and it's just hard because there is that line between, we aren't racist anymore. Some people are, but how do we get rid of all of the
stereotypes?
Yeah, the stereotypes, being at the conference and being around, 2,000 other little people and just seeing them go about their day, run around, do whatever they wanted to do. They had no worries there because they were safe and they were protected. In the outside world, I don't know how that works. I often do get comments and I get stared at, and I've learned now, like I just kind of put it past me because I know that I am okay and that like I'm not as little as I could be.
Right. And do you think sometimes the stares that you and other people with dwarfism get, do you think it's necessarily rudeness or more curiosity?
It's curiosity. I feel like especially when you're an adult little person, when you're a child little person, you're still kind of the same height as your peers. But when you're an adult and you're going out or you're walking down the street or you get out of your car and you're small, it's like they stare and say, well, she's an adult and she's little. And I think kids kind of stare and question it because they don't understand that I'm an adult. So substituting, they're like, shouldn't you be in second grade? Well, no, because I'm 20 something years old and I'm your teacher. So I think the best thing to do is to just break down all the stereotypes and show people that we're completely capable of everything that people are. And really, like, it comes down to, for me, you know, reflecting on this for the past couple of like weeks, it's really like made me so much stronger, not just about being an advocate for little people, but for human rights in general. And like, I wish that I would have known this because I could have saved myself like 6 years of college had I known that I wanted to go into human rights. But like, I'm a strong believer now in human rights, and that no, little people don't face struggles, but the world is created for big people, and it's not, and that I feel like is a human rights issue, because why is everything so big? Why can't everything be smaller and big people have to adapt to the small?
Right. Okay, 30 more seconds. Any final words to the viewers?
If you have questions, you can contact me, and I'm happy to answer questions. I will come to schools, I will come to businesses, anything, just to talk about my experience and what I hope to do. And, you know, I feel like I can talk about diversity and differences because I experience them myself, and I'm educating myself more on them, so I feel like I have a pretty good background.
And how should they contact you?
Facebook or email.
And your email address is, and Todd will put it up on the screen.
Okay, so it's green-eyed girl, GREENEYED GIRL 20@gmail.com.
Right. And again, if the viewers look on the screen, you can see that there too.
And then, yeah, I'm on Facebook, just my name, Sarah. Well, I think it's Sarah E. Elliott.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, because it was interesting to interview you before you went to Washington. Now it's great to have you back on, and I'm glad that you really enjoyed yourself, and I think you're going to do really good things with this.
I hope so.
All right, thank you. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.